Former flat earthers, what made you come round? The inclined seat conformed perfectly to his body, strategically placed in the cockpit so he could reach no buttons with outstretched arms. The straps anchored him firmly in place. They were uncomfortable but necessary. The engine burst to life with a roar that burned out all the other audio. The vibrations went through his body as the G-force began to take hold. The captain was watching the readouts on the LED displays and monitoring their trajectory as the acceleration began to peel his thoughts away. There was no more room in his mind. It had been filled by pure fear. The boosters grew with greater ferocity as they lifted higher into the sky, the sun beaming down on the left side of the shuttle. But faster they went, through max Q and higher into the stratosphere until the engines grew quieter, the air more silent, and the vibrations became less aggressive. They were approaching space, the final frontier. An hour later, and with the path of the shuttle a success, he noticed as his raw emotions withdrew that his body felt funny. Head hair drifted aimlessly across his eyes as the captain's pen hovered in midair, and he knew the impossible was true. His childhood dream, he was in space, weightless. The captain turned around to him and motioned him to unlock his seatbelts. He did as he was commanded. They both left their chairs and glided over to the tiny glass windows to overlook the magnificence of Earth. "What do you think now?" said the captain. He recoiled in horror. It couldn't be. NASA had replaced the windows with high-definition screens in order to perpetrate their lies that the world was spherical. Those On Behind the Curve on Netflix, two of the flat earthers accused the moon of being a giant TV screen controlled by NASA. You weren't too far off here. Story 2. Not a flat earther. I was heavily influenced and believed in multiple conspiracies in the Zeitgeist film as well. There was a never-ending source of dark, shadowy theys and thems controlling everything behind the scenes. I think there were a few factors that helped me escape that. Losing my father, it was such a life-changing event at that age that it made me reconsider everything in my life. Some light training in evaluating information. I learned about how to vet sources, primary, whether something was actually news or just an opinion, an editorial, etc. Ironically, this education came before I was duped. After my dad passed away, suddenly this started to kick in more. A lack of time and means to dig myself a deeper hole. I started college shortly after my father passed, and that, plus a full-time job, took up all of my time. I had none to buy further into the newest crazy stuff. I had no Facebook, no Twitter, no IG, etc., no smartphone or texting. My primary use of Reddit once I discovered it was for r/Naruto, r/Bleach, Rage Comics, and Advice Animals. So, all in all, I think the time away gave me time to detox. If I had been on social media as I discovered those things, I can only imagine I very well may have become a Q believer as well. Looking back, I see how gullible I was in that moment, fooled by the onslaught of half-truths and clever quote-unquote logic of the various theories. I know better now, and I should have known better then, but I've been humbled to the fact that everyone is vulnerable to this sort of stuff. To think otherwise is deluding yourself. Right, this is a really solid base for anyone diving into the various conspiracy rabbit holes. Good writing. Story 3. I spent a brief period as a Twin Tower truther, which is bizarre considering I did see it happening live on TV. I watched 1 or 2 conspiracy videos online when they were newish. They asked questions that couldn't be answered, raised doubts, highlighted coincidences, etc. Basically, I became convinced a missile hit the Pentagon, and that was my belief. I wasn't obsessive over it, just a background belief. Then I came across a discussion online, a debate about what happened, and one poster was pointing out there was wreckage of the plane all over the Pentagon grounds, and I was like, nope, relating to something in one of the videos. However, within seconds of looking online, I found the photos of the wreckage and just about everything else. To cut a long story short, the online quote-unquote documentaries I had previously watched were in fact very carefully crafted pieces of propaganda, designed to make the viewer cast doubt on the event by highlighting very specific and very selective pieces of information, out of context, distorted or just flat out untrue, in order to hint that some vague conspiracy took place without ever specifying that conspiracy. Now, I'm very much a skeptic. The giveaway to these types of conspiracy videos is that they never actually detail the conspiracy itself from the ground up. They never provide a coherent timeline, never provide direct evidence of the conspiracy itself. It's all indirect. Quote, look at this discrepancy, look at this coincidence, look at this oddity, can't explain that, therefore conspiracy. Same with Boston conspiracies, Sandy Hook, all that. Identical process involved each time. I actually spend some time debunking conspiracies online every now and then. It's largely a futile exercise, but the most simple approach is just to ask someone to detail the conspiracy with credible evidence. They almost all instantly fall apart, and to this day, no one has ever provided a coherent theory, not even the guys at AE 911 who make money from this stuff. It's a bizarre hobby to say the least. Story 4. One of my geometry students believed the earth was flat. I found out because the other students were mocking her for it. I told them to knock it off and then quietly didn't for the rest of the year, trying to demonstrate how the earth was not, in fact, flat. We did a day on spherical geometry and measuring angles on a sphere. We did projections from 3 to 2 dimensions and looked at different maps of the earth. They drew the continents on an orange and then peeled it in different ways to make it lay flat and compared distortions between the different ways of opening. I got an airline pilot to come talk about using math, and one kid asked why they fly over Greenland to get to London, so he grabbed my gloves and talked about segments of great circles and how beautiful it was to see the earth curve away from the windscreen. We measured a bunch of shadows on our football field and then Skyped a buddy in Alaska, whose class measured shadows on their field and tried to use our data to calculate the radius of the earth. We were way off. There is a calculus activity on local linearity that any curve can be assumed straight on some small scale, and explicitly stated that it was like how Earth looks flat to us but is really a sphere. We even watched videos of tall mass ships disappearing over the horizon during the break in the final exam. At the end of the year, I pulled her aside and asked if she believed the Earth was flat. She said, well, for airplanes and boats and stuff, and like geometry, it's a sphere, but really, it's flat. So she knew it was round but chose to believe it to be flat. Story 5. A good way to break conspiracy theorists out of their bubble is just to ask them what, in theory, could prove them wrong. Like sample dialogue. Me. So you think the earth is flat? Tell me, what would it take to prove to you that it's round? Go on, let's act it out. I'll be you be me, and you try to convince me the earth is round with this amazing new piece of evidence. Conspiracy theorist. We put a 24/7 camera feed on the moon that show the earth is a rotating globe. Me. Nope, the footage is doctored. It's actually coming from an underground studio in Death Valley. Alex Jones said so I'm not convinced. Try again. CT. We set up a laser on a long stretch of ground and then set up a big wooden post every mile for 3 miles. We lined everything up, put a hole in each post at the same height, and then shined the laser through the first one, but the laser didn't go through the holes in the second and third post, and that proves the earth is curved. Me. Your equipment was faulty. CT. No, it wasn't. Me, then you must be in on it. How did they get to you? And so on. The one thing all conspiracy theories have in common is that they're all unfalsifiable. And the one thing all conspiracy theorists have in common is that they all think they're smarter than you. If you can put a conspiracy theorist in a position where he has to attack his own theory, and then you defend his theory by making further unfalsifiable claims like you're in on it or whatever, then the fact that they're unable to win the argument, even though they're so much more smarter than you, and even though they've been given free rein to make up whatever evidence they want, should hopefully make them realize that their precious theory is actually a just so story. After that, it's easier to get them to accept contradictory evidence. Story 6. He asked me, Major Nerd, you are a smart guy. How do we know the Earth is round? I said, you think it would be because we went to space? He said, yeah, but we didn't. It was a lie to fool the Russians. To which I replied, that's not how we know the Earth is round. We've known for centuries that it was round. How? It's easy, and you can do this too. Stand on any dock in the world and look to the ocean. What part of the boat do you see first? Huh? I don't know. You see the mast and sails first. The question is why? The hull is much larger. Why do we see the top of the mast, then the sails, then the hull? I don't know. Because the Earth is curved, so the tip of the boat appears first as the rest comes into view, literally around a corner. Holy, I'm 40 and nobody has ever explained that so easily to me. I have to think about this. He told me a couple of days later that I changed his mind on the subject. He had no idea we had known for so ever-loving long. Story 7. The flat Earth conspiracy bothers me the most because it's just so pointless. Like, why would anyone go through the time and effort and expense of convincing everyone the Earth was round if it's flat? Like, for what purpose? What is the benefit? How does it really change the average person's life at all? How does the world look different because the Earth is flat but we all think it's round? Most of it seems to be beef with NASA and the government, but A, NASA didn't discover the Earth was round. That knowledge way predates even the founding of America, and it's a conclusion independently reached over and over again across space and time and disciplines. Like, they're not the only space agency out there or organization or company in the world which asserts a round Earth. B. You could argue they propagate it to get federal funding for nefarious purposes, but the DoD, NSA, DHS, FBI, and CIA all get way more and they point blank state they won't tell us what for. It just seems like the most utterly pointless song and dance imaginable if that's what you're really after. Furthermore, it belies the type of person who's never been in charge of organizing anything of substance because if they had, then they'd know that you can't get that much ironclad cooperation amongst a few hundred employees, never mind the whole world across many generations. Even the reptilian and chemtrails QAnon nonsense makes more sense than flat Earth, and that crap doesn't make any sense at all. And if you're enjoying the video, being entertained by some of these stories, please don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos just like this. Story 8. I used to work the same shift in a restaurant with a flat earther. During downtime, she'd talk all about healing crystals and how the world was actually flat. I was in grad school at the time and was never really around someone with these beliefs. So I'd humor her by listening to what her thought process was like without judgment. My take on the whole thing was just that she wasn't a person capable of many obvious critical thinking abilities that most people are simply born with. She was a person who didn't understand physics from a basic level, so it was easy to see how she could get intertwined in a flat earth belief. Doing a simple search to critically understand why this would be false was clearly too much work and quote-unquote nonsense. She would probably just throw her hands up in the air with frustration and skepticism if she even tried. She always considered herself a person of deep thought, but in reality, went through her life being mocked by people with more depth than her and could never get why. So she thought of herself as special and more knowledgeable than everyone else, and happened to have the secrets to life that others were too blind to see. Then she surrounded herself with people of equal thought to further this belief. Story 9. What everyone needs to understand is that flat earthers, just like anti or whatever you have iters, don't actually believe in those things because of the reasoning behind them. It is merely a primitive social and psychological need to feel part of something bigger, to feel like one is a hero or enlightened amongst mere mortals, to feel like one has accomplished something much bigger than others around them. Or it is the result of a deep disappointment and mistrust in society. It is impossible to convince them through facts, because the human mind has an innate ability to wrap the world to match its own beliefs, not the other way around. That's why logical, rational approaches don't work. It's a psychological, social work that needs to be done, and at the root, it is the ability to think critically that must be taught to children, not the memorization of arbitrary things and whatnot. Instead of memorizing poems, teach them why it is good to pour emotions into works of art. Instead of memorizing integral formulas, teach them how these came to be and what they represent. Instead of memorizing birth dates of ancient emperors, teach them what their philosophies were and why they did what they did. Of course, this would all require immense passion from teachers and would render examination a lot harder, so we're stuck with useless tests and arbitrary subjects that don't actually contribute to a person's mental development. Story 10. Not me, but my brother. He was heavy into it, quoting scripture and talking about the firmament and whatnot. I let him carry on for a few weeks thinking, he just found another rabbit hole on YouTube like the JFK one last month. He'll get over it. After 2 months, I realized he actually believed this entirely. So we were sitting and having a drink, and one day I had him explain the whole thing to me from beginning to end. By the end, we were both 4 drinks in, and I stopped him for a moment to ask him a question. Why does it matter if the earth is flat? My brother says, because they're lying to us, man. And the conversation follows. M. And that doesn't answer my question. How does it change you waking up and going to work or anything fundamentally about your life? Him. I guess it's just a belief I have that I shouldn't be lied to. Me. I lie to you all the time, dude. Like I'm only 5 minutes away. And yeah, I don't mind watching your kids. Yeah, I'll bring over some drinks and listen to you ramble, but fundamentally that changes nothing about your life. Him. I never really thought about it like that. Then he called me a schmuck for lying to him all the time and stopped believing everything he saw on the internet. He's great now, albeit massively most of the time, but that's just him. Story 11. When talking with a flat earther, I agree with him. The earth is flat, from a certain perspective. If you're standing on it and using your eyes, yes, it's flat. However, if you change how you measure it or how you view it, then perspective changes. Then I try to steer the talk to being willing to change one's perspective depending on the change of their view. This seems to make it easier for some to meet me halfway and say, from their point of view, it's flat. But if they were able to have another viewpoint, it could change. Baby steps, man, baby steps. I think the issue is what someone touched on in another comment. It makes the world simpler for them. They are distrustful of anyone else knowing something they don't. They want to be able to know it themselves, so they make it simple enough that they can. Whereas most of us are okay with knowing we don't have to or even know most of the things around us, but trust quote unquote experts do, and are not lying to us out of some unknown reason. Story 12. I have a relative who is heavily into many conspiracy theories, 5G and the likes, also flat Earth to an extent. Something I recently learned about her is that she grew up with an incredibly mistreating father who passed away when she was a teenager. She learned to hate authority because of it, in the shape of her father, mistreated her, and now she questions all forms of authority, including government and police. She is ignoring lockdowns and rules around that and has said she will refuse an immunity even though she's a nurse working in a care home and could lose her job for refusing it. It really made me think. The idea that the earth is round is a widely accepted fact taught to us from a young age. I'm really not surprised that, given her childhood, she would distrust info learned during her childhood and try to find ways around it. It's a distrust of the establishment issue, really. Not saying this will apply to everyone, but I would be interested to know the correlation between mistreating childhoods and believing these kinds of conspiracy theories. Yeah, I think many conspiracy theories have some sort of mental problem that's caused them to lose touch with reality, right? Story 13. I will confess it crossed my mind to join the Flat Earth Society as an undergraduate the few times I had heard about them. But let me explain, and it wasn't because I believed for a second the Earth to be flat. I was a physics, math double major with astronomy concentration. As a boy, Sagan's Cosmos was one of my favorite shows. My father and I had been active in the local astronomy club since I was 11. My motivation was that I didn't believe the flat earthers were in earnest. I thought it was a big joke. This was the early 90s and pre-World Wide Web. I had no information about them, and I had spent time with a number of astronomers, both professional and amateur, through our astronomy club, star parties, observatory tours, and social gatherings, and knew that for a bunch of nerds, they knew how to have fun, liked to party, and tended to have keen, albeit esoteric senses of humor. So I thought that the Flat Earth Society was like a social, fraternal organization for astronomers, named after something so utterly ridiculous and anathema to what they knew and believed as a lark. The people I had heard mention it in passing were astronomy or physics professors. They didn't go into detail, and I assumed they were members of or knew of the club. So while it crossed my mind that it might be fun to join, I never knew a flat earther or came across any of their literature. It was only a decade or two later when I heard about them again and discovered that they really do believe the earth to be flat. I promised my interest would not have survived first contact with a member or any of their literature. Story 14. I'll give a serious answer. I wasn't a flat earther, but I was fully convinced that the government was spying on me, using chemtrails to make everyone subservient, that there was an enormous cover-up going on in the federal government, and that a very few small group of people was puppeteering a gigantic scheme to form an authoritarian world government. The thing is, it's so easy to fall into that trap. You read one post, you go, that's interesting. You start a little Google investigation and soon find yourself falling down the rabbit hole of self-confirming, erasing the validity of valid sources because it's part of the cover-up, and soon you've got it all figured out. Quite amazing that gigantic government experiments, international rings, and crimes against humanity are covered up so well that everyone is a sheep, but not you. You found the entire top-secret plan after going around on the Google machine. It's a very self-important thing, honestly. And I'm not being critical of that. I think we all want to be that hero, that Guy Fawkes, the main character who is going to expose and end the evil. It was a dark period of my life, about 6 months of it. I was depressed, scared, but it gave a strange meaning to my life. I got lucky, though. I took a magic trip and escaped the cycle of conspiracy. It came to me after a revelation. Everyone is just doing their own life. Nobody in real life wants to be that big evil guy. And certainly no government agency is interested in me. I made it all up because the allure of the magic world where there is evil and you're the good guy protagonist is so easy to make sense of it all. It gives purpose. It makes this big, chaotic world make sense. I really wish we were kinder to conspiracy people. They need compassion. Story 15. Obligatory? Not me, but I once had the opportunity to ask a journalist and semi-professional Knoller about his obsession with Kennedy assassination theories in person at a party. Basically, I observed how much had already come to light due to the incredible diligence of journalists and politicians and the demands of the general public for knowledge. I asked him what, given all that, remains to be answered that we don't already know. We went back and forth a bit, but at the end of it, he sighed and kind of sagged a little and said something like, I don't know, maybe you're right. I just wish I knew why it had to happen. That was the part that was really key for me. I just wish I knew why it had to happen. This guy had been a teenager or early 20-something in 1963. The event had really scarred him. No answer was ever going to satisfy him because nothing would ever fill that void. I let the topic be and fetched him a drink. Well, if you like these stories, here's more for you. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. I'll catch you in that video.